Hey everyone! Happy Sunday to you too, Leon. Hey Ionard, how are we all doing? It's a lovely Sunday. Time for some good old-fashioned AMAs. Hey Cairo, how's it going? Let's have a look. Looks like we have an anonymous question too. Let's just move that one over. All right. Finishing The Witcher 3. Oh, nice. That's like an achievement on its own, right? I don't think I've ever finished that game. It's just way too long. I think I ended somewhere in the middle, like last playthrough, and then I tried to pick it up, and I was just so lost with everything. I didn't know what I was doing. Like the combat, like I just couldn't get used to it anymore. It was so long ago, and of course I skipped all the tutorials again, so that didn't make it easier for me. I should maybe pick it back up, just as like a nice open world exploration thingy. Yeah, I think that was my issue. Just getting distracted with like all the cool side bits that you could do. It's a bit janky in combat. Yeah, I wonder if they're gonna make a new one. Probably, right? I don't think they're gonna stop at The Witcher 3. They must make like a fourth one. I think it's doing too good for them. But just do a DLC, they drop you in with a pre-built character. They are nice 8-hour stories. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that they dropped you in with like a pre-built character. It probably just levels you up to like a certain level, right? Blood and Wine is more like 20. Yeah, Blood and Wine looks absolutely gorgeous. Hey Oki, how's it going? Pre-built characters is optional. Wait, so it's still Geralt, right? Like if you pick a pre-built character? It just comes with like a bunch of predefined stats and skills probably. Just leveled up with some decent gear. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I only played for Blood and Wine. Yeah, that DLC looks absolutely gorgeous. I never played it myself. I love to watch other people play though. And just like explore the city. It takes a while to find like good streamers that really take their time and not just rush through it though. It's been pretty fun. Pretty colors. Yeah, anyone else been playing any games this weekend? I'm slowly getting back into shooters at the moment. It's been a long time since I played like a shooter game, but I've been getting back into Hell Let Loose. So I play like one game like every evening or something. Rocket League. Of course you're still playing Rocket League. Yeah, I think comparing Rocket League to Hell Let Loose is probably like the polar opposite. Rocket League is like really fun, fast-paced. You can get like games done quickly, where Hell Let Loose is more like really slow, like crawling up to the enemy, hoping that you can take over like an advanced position. It's probably the polar opposite. Crusader Kings 3. Nice. I don't think I've ever played any of the Crusader Kings games. Or... oh, what's that game called? Something Bannerlord. People have been recommending that to me, but I haven't played any of those games. Can't even remember the name. Something Bannerlord. That's the best that I can do. Mountain Blade? Yeah, that might be it. That might be it. Well, now I'm curious, right? Like Mountain Blade. Oh, it is Mountain Blade. Okay, cool. Yeah, I've heard some pretty good stuff about the new one. Like, people have been recommending it to me, especially because I'm working on like a medieval scene. People say that there's some cool inspirational bits in there. So maybe I should give it a try at some point. Would be cool. All right, but yeah, I'm just gonna make a competitor of my own. That is some university stuff right there, Lloyd. Just like, yeah, I'm just gonna make like an MMO that's gonna kill WoW with like my small team of 3 people. Yep, dream big. I don't even know what I'm competing against with that game. I've never played it, but I'm sure I can take their market. Beyond Extent Mountain Blade Battle Knight confirmed. I don't even know anything about the game. Like, how many players can play that game at the same time? I have no idea. I wanna do something though. That would be cool. Like a game night with the server, the community. I'll take this as a yes. Okay. You're just gonna straight up ignore my question. I'll dig into it. We need to find a game, right? And just kickstart this thing, and then we'll see if we can find like other games that might be good. Oh shit. What is that? What is that logo? Is that like a... I don't even know. Like a 4D clover? No. Alright. Anyway. Let's dive into some questions though. Age of Empires 2. That could be an interesting one. Just like some old school games. Alright. Let's dive into some questions though. So... the first one is from Lloyd. What's your favorite part of running this community? That's a good question. I've been thinking about this for a bit. I don't think... if I had to pick one thing, it's probably just talking to other people from the community and really engaging with people, like helping them out. I think that's probably like the thing that I most enjoy. Yeah, because I think it's so cool to see everyone come in with like different skill levels, different inspirations, different things that I want to learn, and then just this, I don't know, this melting pot of just like sharing information, and just being a part of that is really, really cool. So that is definitely my favorite part of running this community. I mean, just in general, right? Like it feels, I don't know, to me it just feels good to help other people. And I kind of do that with the mentorships too, right? Like with those mentorships, but it's more like one-to-one. So it's more isolated. So we go into a meeting, and then you kind of see the growth of this one person, but it's really fun to see like the growth of like the server in general, and like how information gets exchanged and how people are like eager to help each other too. And just seeing that happen with almost none of my input at this point. Like in the beginning I was super active in that, but I can now take a step back and it will just that stuff will happen authentically between people. Which is amazing to see, honestly. It's just amazing to see that happen, where people just communicate and help each other. It's so amazing. And I'm just happy to be a part of that, honestly. That's a good question. It's a good question, Lloyd. Yeah, I've been really honestly enjoying just seeing all the growth and like all the people come in. And I don't know, just again, just being part of this community is so awesome. And I honestly can't thank everyone enough for just making this happen and just, I don't know, just making like a part of my future come true, right? Just helping me build that future together with everyone else. It's amazing. Like a kid learning how to walk. Yeah, sorta, right? It also put me back in touch with the absolute beginners. And sometimes I think that's probably what I struggle with the most, if I'm gonna be honest, is going back to that initial mindset where 3D wasn't a given in my life, but it was more like, oh, that looks interesting, I'm gonna get into it. And some people not knowing how to do stuff that I take for granted on like a daily basis just puts me in this space where well, if I'm gonna be brutally honest, like sometimes I'm really uncomfortable talking about that, because I'm just so used to this mindset of like, you should know this, these are the basics, but I have to understand as well that these are not the basics for people that are trying to get into the space. Like it's like everything is new to them. And sometimes I don't know, like should we call it arrogance? I don't think it's called arrogance, but just like my yeah, I don't know what a good word for that would be. My comfort with my skills and like already knowing the basics for so long just put me in this place where it's really humbling to see people trying to tackle that. It's not arrogance, it's not the right word, but yeah, I would say something like that, right? So that I would assume that people know all this stuff, but then it's unfair to assume that because they're just getting into the space. Hey, Mohammed. Finally made it to the stream. Welcome, man. How are you doing? Yeah, I think you're right, Cairo. I think it's more like assumption bias. And that's honestly been really interesting, but also really tricky to get rid of. Sometimes I feel myself getting frustrated, and I honestly think that people can feel that too, where I don't know, again, just like the assumption bias comes in, right? And I'm just like, you should know this by now, right? But that's just unfair of me. Yeah, anyway, like there's so many really interesting parts of running this community, right? Because that is just like one part of it. Like it puts me back into perspective. Like it really humbles me in that way. And it's also just amazing to see like other people like stepping up to the plate and being like, hey, like is there a way that I can help? And then also getting into this new zone where I'm trying to help people make their own thing happen, like the challenges, for example. Like I think that's a good example where Lloyd came out to me and like approached me like, hey, it was more. We've been talking about this for such a long time, right? Where he came up with a question for one of the AMAs that was like, how can we? I don't know what the question exactly was, but it was something that, wouldn't you love to see people collaborate a bit more? And then I think a week later or something, like him stepping up and then just taking the challenges on was just so amazing to see. And now it grew into this big thing with like 30 people taking part in the challenges, which is absolutely amazing to see. And that's like another part that I enjoy about the community, right? It's been amazing. I couldn't have thought about like all the stuff that we're doing now, like when I started it like 2 years ago or something, a little bit over 2 years ago now. Sometimes it may be a bit tilting when someone would rather come in and ask a simple question and go do some research for basic stuff or stuff we see as basic. It can be lazy. Yeah, but I've been thinking about that too, right? So what if you, because we know that it might be perceived as lazy or that it's basic, but what if you don't know that it's basic and you don't know what to look for? So it's like, imagine coming into a space where you don't know anything, and then yeah, that's true. Yeah, for sure. I know. Like it's an interesting thing, right? I'm also going through like the thought process of like myself in this case, where I often also get that feeling, but then I always need to take a step back and not be like, because it's easy to be like, hey, just Google it, man. Right? That's just like the first reaction that most of us might have. I'm just speaking for myself, right? So that I would have in this case. But then if you take a step back and you just say like, okay, imagine if we go to like, I don't know, if we go into like car mechanics. I don't know. Like where would I start? Like I wouldn't know where to start. Like what would I do? But it's interesting to see. And that's also the part that's really humbling, right? It's putting you back into that place as like a beginner, and really again just becoming in touch with that beginner mentality. Speaking as a beginner, it's really hard to Google for the right thing if you don't know what to look for. Exactly. And that's also something that I've been thinking about, like how to break that down, just how to Google. But then how to Google is like the execution part of it, right? Because if you don't know what to look for, how to Google is not going to help you with that. It's been an interesting journey for sure. And I think it's good that you often, how uncomfortable that those phases are, just get pushed into that uncomfortable space. And yeah, just be humbled by it. It's been interesting. I'm actually amazed by your challenges. I think collaborating is one of the biggest keys to show recruiter studios that you're able to work in a team environment. Yeah, honestly, currently you have to thank Lloyd and Cairo for that, because they are basically running the challenges. They're going to be running the challenges in the future too. So especially thank Lloyd in this position, because he just came up with that idea, and I just was happy to support him with that. And I agree. I think it's really interesting to have a portfolio where the recruiter already knows that you can work within a team with other artists, and that each individual has like a specific like area that they worked on and are like really proud of what they did. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. I think the next one is going to be really interesting. We have a lot of people taking part in this one. It's going to be amazing. All right. Next question, though. This one is from Scott Daniel Burns. Is there a reason you chose to have the unique UVs on the channel too? This is talking about the second UV workflow, where the first UV is my unique UV that I, in my project, use for the trim sheet part. And then the second UV I use for all the layers on top of it, driven by masks. And Scott is interested why there is like a destructive step into it. So there's a second part of the question. Like, considering if you were to make channel 1 the unique set and channel 2 the trim, you wouldn't have to duplicate the mesh for Painter, skipping that destructive step. So what he's pointing out there is that right now I have 2 UV maps, but Painter doesn't allow you to paint on the second UV map. So what I do is I have a duplicate mesh with that is only for Painter, that I use for the mask painting. And since it's using the same UVs as the mesh that we duplicated from in the beginning, we can just use those masks on like the second UVs for the first mesh. I did some breakdowns in like previous streams and also in the blog posts that are on beyondextend.com. So if you're interested in that workflow, you can check those out. But the question here is specifically for that destructive step. Why don't we use the unique UVs in the second channel? So that if you're doing painting in Painter, the first channel is always going to be the unique UVs. So unique UVs on the first channel, so that we don't have to do the destructive step of it. Let me think this through, right? Because yesterday I was thinking about this a little bit. And your unique UVs are in the first. Yeah, I think we're kind of using the same workflow, right? Oh no, your unique UVs are in the first. So that's opposite to what I'm doing. Let's think. I don't think it matters that much. Obviously, you can forego like the destructive part of it. So that would be interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up. I'm thinking about a reason why I did it this way. I think it's more intuitive this way, but then it makes more sense if we can just use the first channel for the unique UVs. I'm just thinking about like some of the possibilities, right? Or like some of the issues that could crop up. I don't think there's any. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. Feel free to pitch in on this too. I think your method may be better for when you do master materials. Yeah, that is true. And that's also where I'm coming from mostly, right? We do that mostly in the production way. But if you're only using shaders with like a second UV channel, it might be worth swapping them out and then just foregoing that whole destructive step on it. Because in the beginning, I was thinking that well, this sort of doesn't make sense anymore now that I'm thinking about it. But if you're doing this step and you have like a painter file that gets rid of the unique UV, then that's gonna destroy more work than you did before. Like now thinking about it, it doesn't really make sense. But I think it's like Cairo said, it's purely from a production point perspective. And it's also way easier to just to create like the unique UVs because you already have all the seams and all that stuff in Blender set up. So yeah, it's in my case it might be production and also just a way that the project flowed together, right? Like I had the trim sheets anyway, and then I was like, what if I add like a second UV layer to this? And I wasn't really thinking about that order just yet. Yeah, that's a good point. I'll need to do some investigations to it. It will, if I want to do this, I'll have to like redo like the UV layers in what is it? In Unreal, in the material editor, right? Because now I'm manually assigning like the second UV layer to like certain textures and doing the same thing for the first one. But yeah, it's an interesting point. It's an interesting point. I never really thought about it. Never really took a step back. Lots of ways to make a cake. Exactly, Cairo. I did the same mistake of doing my trim on UV1 since that was my creative process. Trim it and then add variation. Yeah, I think I'm sort of in the same boat with that. It's more like never really thinking about taking a step back. It's a good question, Scott. That's an interesting one. Next question is from Leon. What are the greatest pitfalls when modeling for modularity that one should be aware of in the planning phase? In the planning phase, it depends on what you define as a planning phase, right? Do you mean like the rough blockout for like all the modules? The main thing is correct pivot placements, making sure that everything snaps together, like using vertex snapping to really make all the seams seamless. Making sure that you build the chunks or like the modules in such a way that you can have tileability, like the material style, a certain amount of times in like your on like your surfaces. Because if you have like a surface that's like, I don't know, like a little bit less than two times your texel density or whatever, right? So you would have your material tile like 1.5 times, for example, where you lose that tileability, and then you'll have to fix it in a different way. Mind your texture size too. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was on about, right? So keep in mind that you also need to tile the textures. You can probably get away with some sneaky stuff there, but I mean, the easier that you make it from the beginning, the easier it is to just add stuff to it. Any other pitfalls? Yeah, building to the grid is also a big one. Make sure, I'm currently working to like the 50 Unreal Engine metrics. So that's what I'm building to. So every piece that I drag around in the scene, apart from the detail meshes, all need to snap on that grid. So if there's like one item that is part of the modular kit but doesn't fit in that 50 grid, right? I need to either change the size of it or I need to adjust the pivot in some way. And there might just be pieces that are not really fit for it. Especially the roofs were pretty interesting for my scene, because you're dealing with a curve that is going across multiple pieces. So I would have an overhang, which is almost flat, right? Because it's an overhang for the roofs. But then as it curves up to like the main section of the roof, the curve would still follow through. And then also I had a top of the roof, which also needs to follow that same curve. So, I mean, curves in general make it super tricky. Or like trickier than just straight angles, right? But they also make it way more interesting. Yeah, I would say that's it. Pivot placement, grid size, texture sizes, and also just the asset sizes. Those are the most important things when planning for modularity. And one bonus tip, if I'm gonna add one, is don't go too small. Try to build to a grid that's like 1 meter or something. Don't go with a grid that's like 25 centimeters, because then at that point, it's so small that you're almost building unique stuff anyway. So keep the grid size large, especially in the beginning. And then just add like detail meshes at a later point. Well, the size thing is almost like a transcendent environment art tip, right? Like if you think about sculpting, you're not going in sculpting like all the small details first. You want to focus on the big pieces and then just build your way down. It's almost in everything that you do. You always start with like the big thing, like an environment. You always start with the block out. Well, most of the time you start with a block out. Because you're blocking in the big shapes, and then you start refining it and you start chiseling down to like the smaller pieces and smaller pieces. The biggest tip you ever got was a pizza crust. What? What do you mean by that? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because that is the big thing, right? Like you're building in a modular way while trying to hide that you're building in a modular way. That's basically what you're doing. Because if you can, and this is still true in my environment, by the way, you can really feel the modularity in it, where there goes a lot of work into it to just hide the fact that it's modular. It's not even the in-between geo. It's almost all geo. It depends on the theme, right? Or like the, what is a better word? Like the subject matter. So I think a good thing to look at is probably some of the Halo stuff, where that stuff is built modularly, but it feels so organic that you don't feel that it's modular in any way. So it's really easy to build something, but then the set allows for like this customizability in it. Yeah, that's another good point. Because it does take a lot of time to just clean up all those things in modularity. Actually, jumping on the modularity and repetition train. I just added the word train in there. It sounded good. How do you efficiently break it? Do you only use vertex painting, decals, or is there something else? Most of it is just meshes first, right? So meshes are always a thing that you need to try first. As it comes to repetition, vertex painting is also a good one. Decals is definitely a really good one. Yeah, I think that's it, thinking about it. So firstly, second UV boy. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely like a good thing, right? Like the second UV, even though it is probably more expensive if you weren't to use it and just stick with decals and vertex painting. It's probably a little bit cheaper. Because you also need to think about like a production environment where you might not be able to have like a second UV on everything. Yeah, exactly. Like Mohammed mentions as well. I love to be able to use it at work. Sometimes you might not be able to do that, right? So if you don't have access to that, like all the stuff that you mentioned, vertex painting, decals, and also creating meshes that break it up. So for example, if you have like a sci-fi facility, like pipes and cables, all those kind of details meshes, they do a really good job at breaking that stuff up. And they also serve for like good player leading in that too. But you have to be careful, right? Because the more unique the pieces are that you're going to add onto it, the more you're going to feel the repetition. So for example, if you have like an open panel, or like some cables coming out of it, that is like one module, you're probably not going to use that module more than 2 times in like an entire level, for example. Because if you're going to do it more, then it's going to be really noticeable. So there's probably like a lot of time that goes into creating variations of those detailed models. Bland model is actually a good model in that case. Yep, exactly. Exactly. And if you want to make something really unique, really take the time to make it unique. And then just only use it like once, maybe twice in your environment. Alright. Good discussions, guys. I like all the stuff that I'm reading here. Plant some happy little bushes. Always add something in your environments like foliage. It always brings like contrast in your scenes, which is always nice. I mean, not always, but like I would say 90%. I'm also a big fan of foliage, so my percentage might be off, but that's my percentage. 90%. Go for it. All right, next question. This is from you, Mohammed. Let's have a look. Did I miss one? No, that's the one. What should you do if you think that the milestones set by the lead are too ambitious and the deadline is too short? It's fairly simple in this case. Just bring it up to the lead and voice your concerns. That's always the first thing. So if you've already done that and he's still adamant that you can make it, give it your best shot. And if you don't make it, it sort of proves the point, right? So it's more like a thing where you have to be really vocal about that stuff. But sometimes it also takes someone to go through the process and be like, look, this is what I would have loved to do, but I didn't really have the time for it. So I had to make some decisions to, I don't know, cut out some, I'm going really generic here, right? Like cutting out some decals or like polishing like a certain section of the model. That stuff is all up for cutting. And then maybe that's fine. Maybe the lead artist has no issue with that. Because there is a difference between what you want to do as an artist personally for an environment and what is production ready. There is usually a difference between the two. Where, I mean, you're not working on personal work anymore, right? So you don't have the creative vision. It's in someone else's hands, and it's more up to you to make suggestions. But then if those suggestions don't go through, or they don't get accepted, then there's nothing you can do about that, really. Generally, right? I'm speaking in general terms. But usually, if you approach your lead and you say, look, I think the timeline for this is too short, and like the stuff that we're trying to do is too ambitious, and if you bring that up, there might be a conversation with the lead where he's like, okay, that's a fair point. Let's see how we can maybe minimize it or scope it down a little bit, and then see where we go from there. I had a discussion with my lead about that since we're in the debugging phase, because a lot of it is yet to be done in my level, for example. And he basically said, we'll see how long it takes. And how long it will take you, and we may change the perspective. I think that's fair. I think that's fair enough. In that case, I would just go to like the second step, like we discussed before, right? Just try to do your best and see how far you can get in the given timeline. Don't do any overtime or something like that, right? Do it in the given time that you have for this specific level. Because usually that's how stuff gets out of control in like the long term. Because say in that case, you do overtime and you start punching more hours, then, and the end result is that the level looks good and the level looks awesome, then the lead might be like, look, you made it in time. What was the fuss all about? Right? So it's a tough balancing act, but that's how I would approach it. But I think he's also aware of it by his answer, right? So he's more curious about how far you can get with it. Because yeah, I'm planning while I'm working, and in mine I'm telling myself that I will not be done with the given deadline. So I might have to do some crunching. Well, you might also surprise yourself though. It also depends on what you... Let's have a look. Let's also approach this from like a devil's advocate perspective, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, this is your first job in the industry, right? Yes. Okay, cool. Because then it might also be easy to underestimate yourself. Or it might be easy to put like the wrong what's it called? Projections or like estimates in the future. Yeah, exactly. I was building up to that point too, where there's a difference between the stuff that you do in production and the stuff that you do in a portfolio. So with your newfound experience with working in a production environment, you might start to notice that, like I said before, there are some sacrifices done to the actual quality of the asset just to keep the production going, especially when, I don't know, in this case it's a level that you're working on, right? But it might be a better example if we look at props, for example. Some of the stuff that people are doing looks absolutely crazy, and this counts also for you, Mohammed. Like, your stuff looks crazy, but the amount of times that we'll be doing such props in games to such a high level of degree at this point is fairly non-existent. Unless it's such an important prop that it has to be done to such a polish amount that, I mean, it must almost be inherently tied to the narrative or to the gameplay in like a really important way. So that's also important to keep in mind. That's why I said, just give it your best shot and see where that takes you, because I assume that you might surprise yourself. The first question he asked me after the test was, will you be frustrated if you don't do the same quality in production? And I completely get it. What was your answer to that question? Because that is a really interesting question. Because that shows you that, first of all, that your stuff is kick-ass. But also that the quality bar for people doing art tests or personal work is still different to what has been done in the industry. In, again, 85 to 90% of the cases, right? Unless it's like a first person, always in camera prop. Like a weapon or something like that. Yep. It frustrates me so much personally. I get it. I get it. And this is, yeah, this is not only for props, right? This is also for world building. This is also for level art. There's production deadlines that are linked to it. And sometimes you might want to work on stuff way longer just to push that up to the quality where you're really happy with it. But honestly, it might just never happen. That's probably the brutal honesty about it. I wanted to show that I was capable of it during the art test, but I know that in the production, it's more about the big picture than each single asset. So it's understandable that with deadlines and production quality, I'll have to adapt. That's a good answer. Yeah, exactly. Now, it's going to become interesting how you're going to feel a couple years in. Because usually that's when it starts to rub, right? And I think you can overcome that though. I think you just have to separate your personal work from your commercial work or like your professional work. And this is something that we all run into, right? I've been struggling with that fairly recently too, where, I mean, I can't go into specifics, obviously, but I was frustrated about something like that too. Where I personally would have loved to put way more time into it, but production deadlines and all that stuff were just different to my timelines that I would have loved. And that was just like there's nothing we could have done about it. Yeah, it's always a battle, exactly. And that's also what makes it interesting too, right? Hold on. Let me first hydrate though. Thanks for the hydrate. All right. I feel like your personal work is a benchmark for the ultimate ability. And what you would be able to deliver in a production is probably half to 70% as good as your max ability. Yeah, I think so. And then also about, like, it's always a battle. That's also what makes it interesting as an artist, right? For some people, it might be really tiring. But I think it's really interesting that as an artist, we need to keep improving. And we need to keep tinkering. And we need to keep looking for, like, the next thing. And always be wary of like our ability to change, our ability to adapt to the future. So I think it's interesting. Oh, right. Next question. This one is from Anonymous. And then we have another question from Mohammed too. So first, this one from Anonymous. have you got any advice for people working from home, especially some that just started in the industry remotely? This is a fairly generic question, right? But I'll do my best to answer it. First off, working from home, make sure that you have good equipment. Make sure that you do have like an ergonomic chair. Usually, with companies working from home now, they have some sort of scheme where you might be able to get a chair from the company, or they might provide you with a little bit bonus on top of that. It might be, honestly, it might be tricky for a beginner that's still on probation, for example. But I would definitely ask for that. Definitely ask for like a little bit of a budget, or if they offer some sort of thing where you can take one of your chairs from the office home or something like that. This is obviously if you already live at a place where you're close to the office. For the fully remote, it might be worth asking them for like a little bit of a budget to get like an ergonomic chair, especially if you're just working on like a, I don't know, worst case scenario, like just like a kitchen chair or something. That's about equipment, right? I think the chair is the most important thing. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff that we can dive into, like that might boost the mood and that might help you enjoy the space that you work in. For example, a recent example that I did, I bought like some Philips Hue lights, and I have my desk fully lit from the back of it, and it's so nice to just be able to flick through different color schemes and just pick like colors that you like. It's something so subconscious, but I can definitely feel that it has like an impact, where it's just more enjoyable. Like say I want to focus, I can put it on, well, it has like a color scheme that's focused. It's like this whitish blue, and it does help me focus though. Now, onto some other stuff where more on like the mentality side, right? Make sure, and this is something that I need to do too. I need to do more of it. Make sure that you take breaks often. Make sure that you go out for daily walks. Make sure that you keep moving. Make sure that you also just talk to people. Just talk to people from the company. Make sure that you stay in contact. This is something that I've been personally struggling with in the last couple weeks or months, where we had such a good, well, we still have, but like such a good studio atmosphere, but it's just harder to stay in touch with people. Or me personally, I'm such a person that kind of needs that physical, not always, right, but like that physical connection, so that you can see people, so that you can talk and just chat about stuff. Because there's something weird that happens when I do the same thing over Teams or Skype or whatever platform. I don't know, it doesn't do the same thing. But yeah, still reach out to people and just try to connect with people too. Talk to your mentor. Talk to some other people in the team, and just chat up random conversations. Like try to basically, yeah, exactly, connect with your team. Try to create those water cooler moments online. In, I don't know, maybe there's like a public voice channel that you can just sit in and just chill out in. Arrange game sessions after work. That's a cool one. That's an interesting one. There's been lots of people that have been doing that at work, but I've not been able to take part in them. Because it is a tough situation getting into the industry remotely and then not having the same connection that I used to have, for example, right? Let's have a think. So we talked about like the equipment, we talked about like the mental side of things. Yeah, I would say, what else is there? I think those are the most important ones though. Yeah. So thanks for the question, Anonymous. And I hope it helped. All right. Oh, let's have a look. What we do at the studio each Thursday night after work, turn on the webcam and talk. Makes you feel connected, really. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. We usually do that on Fridays. But honestly, Thursday might be better. Because Fridays, everyone just wants to enjoy the weekend. All right, next one from Mohammed. How much freedom do you think an artist should have when working on levels for a game? I'm talking about references, choice of props, materials, etc. that the artist would think could fit better than what the art director thinks. So, this is an interesting one, right? Because you're always in a team, so you're never making the decision by yourself. But you should have the freedom as an artist to just pitch new ideas, or like pitch ideas that could work within the style that has been proposed or set by the art direction, and just come up with new stuff that might work within that. Obviously, there are boundaries to that, because if you're gonna break like all the rules from art direction is never gonna let that fly. But it should be stuff that works within the spaces, like the boundaries of those rules, that can really elevate sections of it. And if you adhere to those two examples where you stick within the boundaries, but it's gonna elevate the work, there, in my opinion, is no bad that can be done. Because then you're still like proposing something new, right? Like you're putting your own input into it. You're taking ownership of it too, which is always gonna help you create a better end result, because you have the opinion, and like your thought process is baked into the stuff that you're doing. Choice of props, materials, and what the art director thinks. There's something really weird about like the last part of that statement, right? Because it's almost, to me, it feels like this antagonistic thing where you're like, look, I can do better than you, but it shouldn't be that. And maybe it might also be the wording, right? So I'm not blaming anyone in this, but it should always come from a place where you're working together with them to make something better together. And that comes from both sides, right? That comes from you proposing good ideas, but also the art director being open to those new ideas and just being like, look, this is really cool. What if we also do this, right? Like it's almost like building blocks. So you come in with like a brick, and then the art director can be like, oh, that's cool. Maybe we can do something with that then. Like always staying within the framework that has been set by art direction in general, right? But there should be enough ambiguity to still do stuff. That should be the ideal thing. Now, when there might be other limitations into it too, right? Like the production timelines and all that. Sometimes there's just no time. So that's also a thing that we need to keep into account, where the art director loves the idea. You really want to execute on the idea, but there's just no time. That's also a very real situation too. It's an interesting topic though. It's a good question. All right, we got 3 more questions. Let's take a sip of water first. Feel free to always pitch in on these topics, by the way. If you got anything to say on these topics, or if you just have more questions, feel free to just dump them in the chat. And then if there are questions that aren't linked to the questions that we're going through now, we're gonna go through them at the end of these sessions anyway. So everything will be discussed in here. I've got time. All right. Next question from Philip Coleman. Could you explain the workflow for achieving accurate textile density in an environment? For achieving accurate textile density, just use add-ons. I mean, if you wanna, because it sounds like you already know what the textile density is in this case. When you want to achieve accurate textile density, there's a tons of add-ons that you can just get to achieve perfect textile density. When you're actually trying to plan textile density, that might be also part of the question, right? I would always take the example of just like a flat wall, and maybe the wall in this case is like, to make it simple, 1 by 1 meter. Like, how big is your texture going to be on that 1 by 1 meter? So it's almost like 1 by 1 is like 1K. Then you know that if you're doing like a 2 by 2, then that's going to be 4 sections of 1 by 1, right? So it's going to be like a 2K. I mean, this is like an oversimplified example, but you can apply the same thing to more intricate props as well, where you know the rough dimensions, and you can kind of estimate like the texture size that you need for a prop that's maybe like half a meter by 1 meter or something, and then just use the add-ons in conjunction with that, just to help you out to get really spot on with that. Because usually most add-ons have a setting where you can set the texture size and then like the textile density that you want to get out of it. There are some really good resources out there. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Leonardo Lezzi has done some great breakdowns. Let me just quickly look it up. Oh, it's probably like a blog post that he did. Hold on, I'm just looking for stuff here. Yeah, there we go. That's it. Okay, I'm just gonna link this in the chat. That is like a really good breakdown for textile density in general. Like how to calculate it, how to... Because there's also, like he brings this up too, right? There's differences in textile density based on the assets where they're going to be placed in a level 2 to just optimize it even more. So there's a lot of depth that can go into this. I'd be interested to know what the largest texture size you would probably use in production and what the textile density is these days. I hear we're moving more towards 1024 more and more these days. Yeah, I would say so. Like 1024 sounds like a reasonable thing at this point. Where that is what that means is that you're using a 1K texture on like a 1 meter wall, right? That's what that relates to. I wouldn't say that's out of the ordinary these days. Let's think. Like to actually know what the largest texture size is. It's probably 4K, and then maybe multiple 4Ks in like extreme examples. Like if it's, I don't know, if it's like the most important thing in the entire game or something. It might go multiple 4Ks for environment artists, right? The budgets are going to be different for characters and weapons too. But yeah, if we're talking multiple 4Ks for environment art assets, we're talking about like super unique already. Like usually we go up to like 1 4K, I think. But it is changing all the time though. So I'm just reading through the link that I just shared in the chat, and there's also a difference between like third-person camera, strategic cameras, like first-person cameras, like all of that stuff is baked into like the textile density that you use for games, right? Glad to know I don't need to run from 4K trims. No, I think my trim, I think it might still be 2K, honestly. But I might boost it up to 4K. I don't know. All right, a good question, Philip. So, next question from Subham Tripathi. When working in the studio as a junior artist, let's say you are given a task that you don't know very well or you don't like doing. Would you do that anyway or talk to your lead about your situation? Okay, this is a really interesting one. I'm gonna break it up into 2 pieces, right? Because you don't know very well is very different from what you don't like doing. So let's take the simple one out of these 2. Don't like doing, I would probably still do it. This is dependent on the person you are, but if you don't like doing, that's no excuse, in my opinion. Because you're still working in like a production environment. There's always going to be stuff that you don't like doing. Honestly, there are always going to be things that you don't like doing. And I personally don't want to be seen as a person that as soon as something comes up my plate that I don't like doing, I just start moaning about it and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. Can't we let someone else do it? Because the way that I look at this, right, is that I'm going to be seen by the lead as someone like, oh, yeah, like we can't give them all that we need to get done. And he doesn't really want to be like a good team player at that point anyway, right? Because the stuff that you don't like doing might end up on someone else's plate that they might also don't like doing. And even if it's said or not, usually the teams are so open in talking to each other that they will probably know that it's coming from someone else's plate, right? And you can see where that's going, right? You can probably quickly start to see that if this happens often, then you're going to be in a really bad spot when it comes to being like a good team player. Now, this is totally different to what you don't know very well. I would honestly still do it, but I would also mention that to the lead and say, look, I'm really uncomfortable with this, but I'm ready for the challenge. But we might need to be able to just give this to another person. Or maybe you ask the lead, like, what if I don't know what to do with this? Like, who do I talk to? That could also be like an interesting one. Because you should be open about that stuff. Like if you don't know something very well, it's always good to be as open as possible about it so that you can be in a position where maybe like a senior can come to help at some point. And this is totally fine, right? There's no judgment within that, because as a junior, you have to go through these lessons, as uncomfortable as they are, as anxiety inducing as they are. This is 100% normal. Like, I've went through some uncomfortable stuff, and it made me a better artist in the end, because you learn different workflows. You get to sit down with senior artists and be just be amazed with the stuff that they can do and like the skill set that they have. Where I would almost always try to turn this into like a positive thing, where if you don't know something very well, it's an opportunity to learn. from other people. And honestly, I learned so much from that. What do you all think in the chat? Like, let me just repeat this, right? Like, as a junior artist, let's say you're given a task that you don't know very well or don't like doing. Would you do that anyway? That's basically the question. Because I can see where this comes from, and I think it's a really interesting question. It's also a tricky one. Since November when you started, I had maybe 1 or 2 tasks that I actually liked or knew how to do. Made my lead aware of it, and that's everything he has to do. That's a good point. That's a good point, because that also plays into it, right? Like the longevity of it. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly, Ionard. I think that's also... I mean, we're going a bit meta here, right? It's... You have to think about yourself as a brand. Like, how are you gonna be seen in a company? Or like, how do you want to be seen? Do you want to be seen as a person that just like is in their bubble and in their comfort zone like all the time? Or is it, are you the person that's just going out there and like, look, that's a challenge. I want that. I want to do that stuff. And I think both are fine to a certain degree. Like you need like a balance of people in a team, I think. But that's game dev. 80% debugging, 20% creating. Yep. Exactly. I think that's true though. There's probably a lot more tedious stuff that goes into game art than people actually realize. You can show that you made a good attempt to try and that would probably make him or her more willing to help. Exactly. Like that's... I've got put into like some really uncomfortable situations in the beginning of my career at Frontier, which is good, right? Like I don't want to sound negative at all with that. But there, for example, there was the time when I had to do what are they called? The crash test dummies in Planet Coaster. So here I am, an environment artist, sorta, I don't know, like being challenged with like a more character arty thing, right? But it was still like hard surfacey, so it wasn't really, it didn't have to be like fully animated or like super clean. But it was a really interesting challenge because it was something different. And as uncomfortable as it was, I said like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll make it work. And there were times when I absolutely just didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I just went to the senior artist and said like, look, I gotta be honest here. Like I'm not sure what I'm doing here or what I'm supposed to do. Can you just come and help me out just a little bit? And just give like suggestions or like maybe help me out of the way. And just that little moment of you opening yourself up and being vulnerable might sound like a really counterintuitive thing to do, right? But that's gonna make you be appreciated in the team. This obviously needs to come with, well, it might not be obvious to a lot of people, but you have to try it first. Like, that's what Cairo already mentions, right? You have to make a good attempt at trying, because if you don't do that and just always ask people, then you're just gonna be seen as like the annoying person that just never tries anything, just comes and asks anyway. You gotta be proactive, try stuff, be open to failure, and don't be afraid of it. Because honestly, what's the worst that can happen in game dev? Someone else will probably take it. That's probably the worst thing that can happen. It's not like you're gonna lose your life or something like that. It's not life or death. It's a really interesting question though. And then the last one, also from Subham. When working in the studio, if you don't know something, do you watch the tutorial to learn, or do you pass that work onto someone else? I think both can apply at certain times when it's so far out of your wheelhouse. So for example, an extreme case, you get handed a character as an environment artist, then it's time to pass that work on to someone else. But if it's something within your boundaries, it's totally fine to just watch tutorials and like learn on the job. It might also be good to just chat to other people too, because I mean, it is kind of weird if you have like all the knowledge around you and then you just go to probably like mediocre videos online, right? Because some of the stuff that you're looking up might not be I don't know, the best research topic or the most available out there on YouTube. So instead of, well, maybe watch like a tutorial or like try to learn more about the topic a little bit, but also don't be afraid to just ask people around you or like virtually around you, right? It's probably a little bit trickier virtually because you need to find out who's the person to talk to. But just talk to your lead and say like, look, I'm not sure how I need to do this rock formation. I'm just saying something, right? And I'm looking for someone that can help me. Do you know someone that can help me with this? And the lead might probably, well, either help themselves or just point to like a senior artist or I don't know, like a more experienced artist on that front. That's probably the best way to know. But it's totally fine to also watch tutorials to learn though. That's 100% fine. All right. That was it for the questions. This was a good one though. Some really good questions. Some interesting ones. Yeah, some ones that I wasn't sure about, like especially the textile density, right? It's kind of an interesting question, but I'm pretty sure that the post that I linked in the chat is gonna help people out with that. What did you all think of this session? Are there any other questions, by the way, on any of the topics that we discussed? Feel free to just drop it in the chat, and then we can talk about it a little bit more. Let's have a... Yours flew under the radar? Hold on. Hold on. Did I miss one? Let's have a look. Oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, shit. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. So, let's add that in here. Yeah, I only checked the ones after like the bot reminder, which is my bad. So, pretty informative. Thanks, man. But it was connected to what's already covered. No, we can still dive into it though, because I think it's a good one. So, let's have a look. So this is a question from Adam. Across different levels of experience slash seniority, how much autonomy are you usually given in the day-to-day assignments? speaking on a rough scale from make me this prop with this texture and this limit to go build me a village, you have 2 months. Yeah, this is a really interesting question. So usually in the broadest form, how we define it is that a junior needs a lot of help from senior people, right? Not too much ownership in that role just yet, because you're onboarding, you're getting used to the workflow, you're getting, like you said, like make me this prop with this texture, material, and try limit, and work within those boundaries, but you actually get given something with set boundaries, and there's usually not that much room for interpretation, especially for your first couple of things, right? Then as you grow and you get more comfortable with the art style, the art bible, the style that you're working for, also the workflows that you're using, and just the people around you too, and just get a little bit more settled in the team and all that stuff, then you're gonna see that you get more responsibility and like more autonomy in your stuff. So if we look at, because we're talking about prop artists anyway, if we look at the differences between a junior and an intermediate is gonna have autonomy, but is not gonna set the benchmark for the game in general. So that is a big difference between an intermediate and like a senior. Like a senior will probably help define like how spaces look and how things feel, like how props are gonna look. They're gonna set the standard almost. It also depends if you have a company that still has higher people than that, right? Like for example, at Ubisoft, we do have quote unquote, how do we call them? We call them experts. Sometimes you also see them as principals too. And they are obviously, they're going to be driving like a lot of stuff. Like a principal artist, when we're talking about props again, they are going to be driving the pipeline. They are going to be up to date with the latest things. They're going to be basically defining like the whole workflow for like the entire team. And also together with that, like build benchmark props and like show everyone in the team how it's going to be done. Not leading a team, right? Because usually what happens is you have the base level is junior, then you go to intermediate, then you go up to senior, and then there's a split that happens usually. So then you can go more on like the management track, or you can go more on like the art track, and the art track is more the principal route or the lead route. So lead is more management, principal is more art in general. And yeah, if we look at the rough scale that you mentioned, right? Like go build me a village, you have 2 months. Then that is more something that either a senior or a principal will do. Like this is just like they give you, ideally they give you like, look, this is what we're trying to build. Just like a generic overview. And these are some of the limitations that have been set by the art direction, by the art director, right? And then you can come up with, as a senior or a principal, right? You can come up with stuff that works within those boundaries and really set the tone for like the rest of the team. Whereas a junior and an intermediate, you're more going to be following the example that have been set by a senior and a principal. That sounds pretty intuitive, asking since I'm in a position where my lead is not an environment person, so I get assigned things on a basis of go figure it out and implement it. Well, this is the interesting thing, right? Like all of the stuff that I just mentioned is pretty theoretical, honestly. That's how it sort of ideally should work. But in like the actual practical examples, you might have a lead, like in your case, that is not come from like an environment artist role, but maybe wants to go more into art direction. Maybe he came from concept or whatever, right? So they are not in touch with how to actually implement it. They are more like, look, this is the vision that I have, or this is the stuff that I want you to do, but the actual implementation, you have to do it. And I think there's good and bad things about it, right? Because then you can actually own all the stuff that you do. My lead is the director. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Also, different hierarchies too, right? Where sometimes you would ideally have like a step between a lead and director. But sometimes like smaller companies or like different companies, different hierarchies have like different setups too. Asking since I'm in a position, yeah, go figure it out and implement it. I honestly like that kind of approach though. Like if they know what they want to have in the end, and if the boundaries are sort of defined well enough, so that you have the play space is open for you to just do it and implement it. I honestly think, as daunting as it sounds, that's probably the place where I thrive. Where I'm just like, look, I'll just work within this and I'll make something. Definitely glad with the experience I'm getting. Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because you, as an artist, you want to have autonomy. And without going into details, like that's the place that I'm in too. Where I mean, I feel like I'm also like punching above my weight. And that's good, right? That's good. Cairo, do you see yourself aiming for more of a lead role or a principal role out of interest? Honestly, that's a good question, man. I don't know. I keep flip-flopping between the two, honestly. And I think Beyond Extent is also like an impact on that, because it feels like with Beyond Extent I'm doing more like the lead sort of stuff. Not with the organization per se, right? But it's more I'm helping junior artists. No, it's fine. You can get personal with this. If it gets too much, then I'll just don't answer it. That's fine. But that's also what I'm feeling with Beyond Extent, right? Like I'm sort of trying to help junior artists to get to a position where they can go into the industry. So I'm kind of already fulfilling that role with Beyond Extent. So that makes me more inclined to go towards a principal role, because then I have the separation between the two. But I honestly don't know. Like Beyond Extent is your leads needs being fulfilled. Yeah. But it's so interesting, right? Because I don't know where all that stuff is going to go in the future. So it might be that at some point, I don't know, like imagine me taking more like a minimal role if I just scrap all my mentorships and more go into streaming personal work, for example, and make that more Beyond Extent. And then obviously still helping people in the community, but less of an active individual role on like the mentorship front. Maybe that might tip the scales to a point where I want to take on a bit more lead responsibilities at work. I mean, we're talking for our future, right? Because we're I still need to get to senior first. Small steps. But yeah, it is interesting though. I wonder how much of that stuff is going to change in the future. Just when it comes to me personally, right? Like, straight to, oh my god, Beyond Extend Studios too. I don't know. I've been thinking about that idea, but I don't want to turn it into like a studio thing. It just, well, first of all, it's wrongly set up to become that anyway. I just wanna have fun with my personal work. No strings attached. Don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate it. Just focus on the fun. That's my main thing with my personal work. So if I then turn that into like, I don't know, like a decagon or something, right? I don't know. I don't really want to do that. Man, straight to art direction, that would be such a scary jump. Because this is also like an important thing, right? I feel, and this has been known throughout the industry, I think, that sometimes there's not enough preparation time for the role that you're going to be taking up. But yeah, so far so good, I would say, in my current role. It's going to be interesting in the future. All right, cool. Another 10 good questions. We have been going through like a lot of questions with these AMAs. It's been pretty amazing to see the amount of questions that have been coming through, like over the last couple of months, like really interesting ones as well. It would be interesting to maybe get together with a couple of people and just have like a free form discussions about like all the most interesting topics. Just get some people together. Might be interesting. That would be great. Got a dash, streaming some personal work soon, but I really like today, very focused. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to be a little bit more concise with the answers too. It's something that I'll need to keep working on. Yeah, I've been thinking about something like that, Mohammed, where it could be like a good idea for a podcast. I do have some stuff that I'm still working on, right? So there are some new things that are coming to Beyond Extend in the future. I'm almost ready to sort of start testing the trial runs for like another thing that's coming soon. But this is like a thing that's separate. I think that would be interesting. Just have like a panel discussion about like some of the questions that are in here. I've been saving them all from like a couple of months, so there's enough content to go through. All right, everyone. An hour and a half. This was a good session. I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. And I'm gonna probably take a little bit of a break and then dive into some personal work. I might even do some streaming later on too. I'm feeling good about today. So it was awesome to have you all here, and I wish you all a great Sunday. See ya!